Captain Olivia Reeves stood on the flight line at Edwards Air Force Base, the California desert stretching endlessly around her. The morning sun glinted off the angular surfaces of the F-35 Lightning II fighter jet before her, a $100 million marvel of American aerospace engineering. At 29, she possessed the kind of quiet confidence that came from thousands of hours in the cockpit and an unmatched understanding of the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. Her dark hair was secured in a regulation bun beneath her flight helmet, not a strand out of place despite the pre-dawn briefing that had started her day at 0400. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. As she completed her pre-flight check, Olivia's eyes scanned the aircraft with practiced precision. The Lightning II was more than just a machine to her, it was an extension of herself, a perfect synthesis of human and technology designed to own the skies. Every control surface, sensor array, and weapons system was as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. What the official records didn't mention was the grueling path she'd walked to stand on this tarmac, or the fact that her grandfather, General James Reeves, USAF retired, had taught her to fly in a restored P-51 Mustang before she could drive a car. "Ready to go, Captain," called Senior Airman Miguel Santos, her dedicated crew chief, as he handed her the final clearance paperwork. "Always," Olivia replied, accepting the clipboard with a nod of appreciation. Santos was one of the good ones, judged her by her skills, not her gender. That made him rare in a world where female fighter pilots were still statistical anomalies. As she climbed into the cockpit, Olivia felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. The tight confines of the seat, the massive power humming beneath her, the knowledge that within minutes she'd be soaring at speeds approaching Mach 2, it never got old. The cockpit sealed with a soft hiss, and the displays came alive with multicolored telemetry and system status indicators, bathing her face in their cool glow. "Tower, this is Lightning 7-4, requesting clearance for test flight protocol Echo 6, she said into her helmet mic, her voice calm and measured despite the excitement building in her chest. "Lightning 7-4, this is Tower. Clearance granted for Echo 6. Wind is 080 at 15 knots. Skies clear. You are cleared for takeoff on runway 29er. As the massive Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine roared to life behind her, Olivia felt the vibrations through her body. This wasn't just any test flight. Today she would be pushing the envelope of the F-35's stealth capabilities against the newest generation of air defense systems. It was the kind of mission that required absolute precision, split-second decision-making, and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing scenarios, all skills she had honed to perfection during her career. What she didn't know as she accelerated down the runway was that today's flight would change everything, for her career, for the Air Force, and possibly for national security itself. "Rotation," she murmured to herself as the airspeed indicator hit the critical number. The nose of the F-35 lifted smoothly, and within seconds, the wheels lost contact with the earth as the $100 million aircraft sliced into the morning sky with effortless grace. "Lightning 7-4 is airborne," she reported, pulling back on the stick to establish a steep climbing attitude. The G-forces pressed her into her seat as the aircraft rocketed skyward, the sprawling test range quickly shrinking beneath her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 5 miles behind and 2,000 feet below her, a different kind of drama was unfolding in the control center. Colonel William Barrett, Edwards AFB commander, stood with his arms crossed, watching Olivia's flight path on the massive tracking displays. At 52, Barrett was old-school Air Force, a decorated combat veteran with over 4,000 hours in F-15s and F-22s. His face, weathered by years of high-altitude flying and desert deployments, betrayed nothing as he monitored the test. "She's pushing it too hard on the climb," he muttered to Major James Wheeler, the test program director standing beside him. "Typical Reeves, always has to show off." Wheeler glanced sideways at his commanding officer, careful to keep his expression neutral. "Actually, sir, she's following the test protocol exactly as approved." That climb rate maximizes our data collection for the stealth profile assessment. Barrett's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I know the protocol, Wheeler. I wrote half of it. Just keep an eye on her. She may have aced every simulator scenario we've thrown at her, but real-world testing is different. Wheeler nodded, though privately he wondered what Colonel Barrett's real issue was. Captain Reeves had the highest performance metrics of any test pilot in the program, man or woman. Her understanding of the F-35's complex systems was so thorough that the engineers often consulted her when anomalies appeared in the data. Yet Barrett's resistance to her presence in the program had been evident from day one. In the air, Olivia had reached her designated test altitude of 30,000 feet. The sky above her was a deep cobalt blue, nearly black at the edges where the atmosphere thinned into the void of space. Below, the Mojave Desert stretched out in a patchwork of browns and tans, its rugged beauty concealing the sophisticated electronic warfare ranges where her aircraft's stealth capabilities would be tested. Lightning 7-4, this is Control. You are cleared to begin testing sequence. Proceed to Waypoint Alpha and engage stealth protocols. Roger that, Control. Proceeding to Waypoint Alpha. Olivia banked the F-35 into a smooth turn, setting course for the first test point while systematically activating the aircraft's full suite of stealth technologies. The Lightning II was designed around the concept of low observability, its angular shape, special coatings, internal weapons bays, and advanced electronic warfare systems all worked in concert to make it virtually invisible to enemy radars. Today's test would pit those capabilities against the newest generation of detection systems, an elaborate game of hide-and-seek played out across miles of desert at near-supersonic speeds. As she approached Waypoint Alpha, a notification appeared on her display. The voice of Major Wheeler came through her headset, Lightning 7-4, be advised we're seeing some unusual activity on the eastern edge of the range. Nothing that should interfere with your test, but keep your eyes open. Copy that, Control. Any specifics? There was a pause, longer than normal communications protocols would dictate. Just some unexpected electronic signatures. Could be some civilian equipment interfering with the range systems. Continue with the test pattern. Olivia frowned slightly. Edwards was heavily restricted airspace, and the eastern range bordered sensitive military installations. Civilian interference should have been impossible. She made a mental note to stay alert as she continued toward her first objective. For the next 45 minutes, Olivia put the F-35 through a series of complex maneuvers, alternating between stealth mode and conventional flight profiles to give the ground systems opportunities to track and then lose her aircraft. Each run was precisely executed, generating valuable data on the effectiveness of both the Lightning's stealth systems and the new detection technologies being tested against it. But as she completed the third run, something caught her attention. A momentary flash on her threat detection system, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. It didn't match any of the signatures she expected from the test range systems. Control, this is Lightning 7-4. I'm picking up an anomalous signal at bearing 085, approximately 30 miles. Again, there was that unusual pause before Wheeler responded. Lightning 7-4, our ground systems aren't showing anything in that sector. Could be a false positive from your onboard systems. Olivia trusted her instruments, and more importantly, she trusted her instincts. In the world of fighter aviation, instincts weren't just feelings, they were the subconscious processing of thousands of hours of experience, recognizing patterns too subtle for conscious thought. I'm going to make a sweep of the area, just to be sure, she decided, already banking the aircraft toward the eastern edge of the range. Negative, Lightning 7-4, came Colonel Barrett's voice, cutting in sharply. Maintain your test pattern as briefed. We have ground assets that can investigate if necessary. Olivia hesitated. A direct order from the base commander was not something to be taken lightly. But that flash on her systems, it had the characteristics of an advanced electronic warfare signature, the kind used by sophisticated adversary systems. With respect, Colonel, I'm in the best position to investigate, and it will only add 5 minutes to the flight profile, she replied, keeping her voice even and professional despite the tension building in her chest. The F-35 sensors are specifically designed to detect threats that ground systems might miss. Captain Reeves, Barrett's voice had taken on the cold edge that pilots throughout the base had learned to fear. This is not a request. Return to your assigned test pattern immediately. That's an order. Olivia's hand tightened on the control stick. Every instinct told her something was wrong, but Barrett's order left no room for interpretation. Reluctantly, she banked the aircraft back toward waypoint Delta to continue the test sequence. Returning to test pattern, sir, she acknowledged, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. For the next 20 minutes, she executed the remaining test points with mechanical precision, but her attention remained divided. The anomalous signal had not reappeared, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had been missed. As she completed the final run, another communication came through. Lightning 7-4, this is control. Test sequence completed successfully. Return to base for debrief. Roger that, control. Returning to base. As she banked toward Edwards, Olivia made a decision. Her return flight path would take her within visual range of where she detected the anomalous signal. It wasn't quite disobeying orders, she was returning to base as instructed, but the specific route wasn't specified. If Barrett called her on it later, she'd face the consequences. Lightning 7-4, adjusting course for fuel efficiency on return, she reported, knowing the controllers would see her new heading but hoping they wouldn't question it. As the F-35 streaked through the sky at 30,000 feet, Olivia activated the aircraft's advanced electro-optical targeting system, scanning the desert below with a resolution capable of identifying vehicle types from miles away. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the empty expanse of restricted military land. Then, at the edge of her scanning range, something caught her eye. A small convoy of 3 vehicles, positioned in a pattern that seemed deliberately concealed among the natural rock formations. They weren't military, at least not U.S. military, and they certainly weren't supposed to be there. Control, this is Lightning 7-4, she reported, a new urgency in her voice. I have visual confirmation of unauthorized vehicles at coordinates 34.876 north, 117.329 west. 3 vehicles, non-standard configuration, with what appears to be electronic equipment deployed. This time, the response was immediate. Lightning 7-4, this is Barrett. Break off surveillance immediately and proceed directly to base. This is not your concern. The sharpness in his tone took her by surprise. It wasn't just annoyance at her skirting his orders, there was something else there. Concern? Fear? She couldn't quite place it. Sir, with all due respect, these vehicles are within restricted military space with what looks like signal intelligence equipment. This should be investigated. Captain Reeves, Barrett's voice had gone deadly calm. You are testing my patience. For the final time, return to base. Ground security will handle this situation. Copy that, she replied, banking away from the area. But as she did, she captured several high-resolution images using the F-35's onboard systems and transmitted them to her personal data partition on the base servers, a security protocol that allowed pilots to maintain their own flight records for debriefing purposes. The remainder of the flight back to Edwards passed in tense silence. As she brought the F-35 in for a textbook landing, Olivia knew that the confrontation with Barrett was far from over. Whatever she had discovered out there had struck a nerve, and she was determined to find out why. As the canopy lifted after engine shutdown, she was not surprised to see Colonel Barrett himself standing on the tarmac waiting for her, his face set in hard lines, arms crossed over his chest. This was unusual. Normally the base commander wouldn't personally meet a test pilot after a routine flight. My office. Now, was all he said as she climbed down from the aircraft. 20 minutes later, after changing out of her flight suit, Olivia stood at attention in Barrett's office as he paced behind his desk. The room was Spartan, a few service commendations on the walls, a model of an F-15 Strike Eagle, and a family photo showing a much younger Barrett with his wife and son in front of the Air Force Academy chapel. Do you make a habit of disregarding direct orders? Captain Reeves?" Barrett finally asked, his voice controlled but edged with anger. "No, sir. I was returning to base as ordered. My flight path happened to—" "Don't insult my intelligence," Barrett cut her off. "You deliberately diverted to investigate something you were explicitly ordered to leave alone." Olivia met his gaze. "Sir, unauthorized vehicles with electronic warfare equipment in restricted airspace represent a serious security breach. I acted in accordance with standing protocols for identifying and reporting threats." "And did it occur to you that the situation might have been more complex than it appeared from 30,000 feet?" Barrett asked, leaning forward on his desk. "That perhaps your commanding officer had reasons for his orders that you weren't privy to?" "It did, sir," Olivia admitted. "But my training also teaches me to trust my instincts and report what I observe. Those vehicles weren't ours, and their equipment had signatures consistent with advanced SIGINT collection capabilities." Barrett studied her for a long moment, then sighed heavily and sat down. "Captain Reeves, you're a gifted pilot. Your technical skills are exceptional, and your understanding of the F-35 systems is unparalleled. But there's more to being an officer than flying skills." "Sir," he held up a hand to silence her. "I'm not finished. Part of being an officer is understanding the chain of command and trusting that your superiors might have information you don't. Today, you put your judgment above mine, and that's not acceptable." Olivia stood silently, her face betraying nothing despite the frustration building inside her. Barrett was right about the chain of command, but something about this situation felt wrong. The vehicles, Barrett's unusual behavior, the way he had personally come to meet her plane, it all pointed to something more significant than a simple breach of protocol. "As of this moment," Barrett continued, "you're grounded pending a full review of today's incident. I'm also recommending you for reassignment to the training squadron at Eglin. Your testing days are over, Captain." The words hit her like a physical blow. Grounded. Removed from the test program. Sent to train new pilots instead of pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the world's most advanced aircraft. It was a career death sentence, and they both knew it. "May I ask why, sir?" "My performance metrics are the highest in the program. I've completed more successful test flights than any other pilot. One disagreement about a potential security threat seems, this isn't about your flying ability," Barrett interrupted. "It's about judgment and discipline. I can't have a test pilot who selectively decides which orders to follow based on their own assessment of the situation." There was something in his tone, a subtle tension that hadn't been there in previous interactions. Barrett had never been her biggest supporter, but this level of severity seemed disproportionate to her actions. "Is there something else going on here, sir?" she asked carefully. "Something about those vehicles specifically?" Barrett's expression hardened. "You're dismissed, Captain. Report to Major Wheeler to turn in your flight status credentials, then clear your schedule for the inquiry board tomorrow at 0900. As she saluted and turned to leave, Olivia knew that her career at Edwards might be over, but her investigation into what she had seen was just beginning. The vehicles, Barrett's reaction, the anomalous signals, they all painted a picture of something much larger than a simple disciplinary issue. What she didn't know was that before sunrise, that suspicion would turn into certainty, and her grounding would become the least of her concerns in a rapidly escalating crisis that would test not just her flying skills, but her courage and determination in ways she could never have imagined. Olivia found herself alone in her small apartment on base, the silence deafening as she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee growing cold before her. The digital clock on her microwave read 2:37 a.m., but sleep had proven impossible. Her mind kept replaying the day's events in an endless loop, the anomalous signal, the unauthorized vehicles, Barrett's unexpectedly harsh reaction, and her abrupt grounding. Something wasn't adding up. As an officer with top security clearance, she understood there were operations she wasn't privy to, classified activities that required compartmentalization. But unauthorized electronic surveillance equipment in restricted airspace wasn't something that should be casually dismissed. It should trigger immediate security protocols, not a cover-up. With a sigh, Olivia opened her secure laptop and accessed the base server. the high-resolution images she'd captured during her flight were still in her personal partition, untouched. She began methodically analyzing them, using her training in electronic warfare and threat identification to look for clues. The vehicles were unmarked, their configuration consistent with mobile SIGINT platforms. But there was something else, a subtle detail in the arrangement of their antenna arrays that triggered a memory from her intelligence briefings. "That's Chinese," she murmured to herself, recognizing the distinctive configuration of a PLA electronic warfare unit. "What the hell are they doing on U.S. soil, and why is Barrett covering for them?" Her phone buzzed with an incoming text, making her jump in the pre-dawn stillness. It was from Miguel Santos, her crew chief. "Check your F-35's diagnostic logs from Sector 085. System flagged anomalies but Barrett ordered records purged. Back them up first. Something big happening. Be careful." Olivia's pulse quickened. Santos was risking his career by reaching out like this. Whatever was happening went beyond a simple disciplinary issue or territorial dispute. She quickly downloaded the diagnostic data from her secure server access and began analyzing the logs. What she found sent a chill down her spine. The F-35's sophisticated sensors had detected a complex electronic signature consistent with a prototype weapon system, one designed to disable electronic systems across a wide area. The implications were staggering. If deployed against a military base like Edwards, it could potentially neutralize communications, radar systems, and even the advanced electronics that kept aircraft like the F-35 operational. She reached for her phone, then hesitated. Who could she trust? Barrett was clearly compromised in some way. The chain of command was compromised. Going outside official channels with classified information could be seen as treason, yet doing nothing might allow a catastrophic attack on U.S. soil. A sharp knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Instinctively, she closed her laptop and moved to the small desk drawer where she kept her service weapon. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Captain Reeves? It's Major Wheeler. We need to talk. Now." Relief flooded through her as she recognized the voice of the test program director. Wheeler had always been fair, focused on the mission rather than politics. She unlocked the door to find him standing there in civilian clothes, his face grim in the dim hallway light. "Inside, quickly," she said, ushering him in and locking the door behind him. Wheeler didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Barrett's working with them," he said bluntly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't know why or how deep it goes, but he's actively preventing any investigation into those vehicles you spotted." "They're Chinese SIGINT units," Olivia replied, turning her laptop to show him the images she'd captured. And the F-35 sensors picked up emissions consistent with an EMP weapon system, something that could potentially disable the entire base. Wheeler's face paled. "That tracks with what I've been seeing. Strange directives, unusual access granted to civilian contractors who don't appear in any database, critical systems being taken offline for maintenance without proper documentation." "We need to alert command," Olivia said, reaching for her phone. Wheeler caught her wrist. "I tried. All external communications are being routed through a new security protocol that Barrett implemented last week. Nothing gets out without his team reviewing it first." The implications settled over them like a physical weight. They were isolated, potentially facing a direct threat to national security, with no clear path to alert higher authorities. "There's one option," Olivia said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. The F-35 secure data link can transmit directly to NORAD and Strategic Command. It bypasses local communications infrastructure completely, designed specifically to maintain command integrity in contested environments. "You're grounded," Wheeler reminded her. "Your access has been revoked." On paper, Olivia agreed. "But Santos is on our side, and the night shift in maintenance is skeletal. With your authority as program director and his help as crew chief, we could get me airborne before anyone realizes what's happening." Wheeler considered this, weighing the risks against the potential consequences of inaction. "If you're wrong about this, we're looking at court-martial, maybe even charges of treason." Olivia met his gaze steadily. And if I'm right and we do nothing, we could be allowing a direct attack on U.S. military capabilities. I'll take full responsibility. I'll say I forced you to help me. But we need to act now, before whatever they're planning goes operational. After a moment of tense silence, Wheeler nodded. I'll call Santos. Be ready to move in 15 minutes. The next half hour was a blur of covert movement and careful coordination. Using Wheeler's access codes and Santos's knowledge of the base's security patterns, they managed to reach the maintenance hangar where Olivia's F-35 was undergoing routine post-flight checks. I've disabled the transponder, Santos whispered as he helped Olivia with her pre-flight checks. You won't appear on standard radar, but the stealth systems will still make you nearly invisible to anyone looking. You'll have about 30 minutes of fuel once you reach altitude, enough to get clear of the range and establish a secure data link with Strategic Command. What about the authorization codes? Olivia asked, knowing that without proper clearance, her transmission might be ignored or treated as a drill. Wheeler handed her a small digital key. My emergency authentication token. It won't last long once they realize what's happening, but it should be enough to get your message through. As Olivia climbed into the cockpit, the enormity of what she was attempting settled over her. This wasn't a training exercise or a test flight, this was her, deliberately violating direct orders, stealing a $100 million aircraft, and potentially ending her military career. But if her suspicions were correct, the alternative was unthinkable. Good luck, Wheeler said simply as the canopy lowered. The unspoken understanding passed between them. This might be the last flight of her career, possibly the last act of her freedom, but it was necessary. The F-35 powered up in near silence, its systems designed for stealth operations. With Santos's help, she was able to bypass the standard tower communications and taxi directly to the auxiliary runway used for emergency operations and covert deployments. Going dark, she murmured to herself as she pushed the throttle forward. The Lightning II accelerated down the runway, lifting into the night sky with its characteristic grace. No lights, no radio communications, running on minimum power, a ghost rising into the desert darkness. As soon as she cleared the immediate airspace, Olivia activated the F-35's secure communications array, inputting Wheeler's authentication codes and setting up a direct link to Strategic Command. But before she could begin transmission, her threat warning system lit up with multiple alerts. What the hell, she muttered, scanning the displays. The eastern edge of the range, where she'd spotted the vehicles earlier, was now lit up with electronic activity. Something was powering up, its signature growing stronger by the second. Instinctively, she banked the aircraft toward the threat, activating her full sensor suite to gather as much intelligence as possible. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The Chinese equipment was now fully operational, emitting patterns consistent with a massive electromagnetic pulse generator preparing for discharge. If activated, it would send a devastating pulse across the entire base, frying electronics, disabling security systems, and rendering the most advanced aircraft in the U.S. arsenal temporarily useless. It was the perfect prelude to a coordinated attack or a massive intelligence theft operation. With growing horror, she realized the timing wasn't coincidental. Her grounding, the unusual security measures, Barrett's strange behavior, it had all been orchestrated to ensure she wouldn't be in the air when the attack began. Someone had feared exactly what was happening now, that she might detect and disrupt whatever operation was underway. Strategic Command, this is Captain Olivia Reeves, call sign Lightning 74, authentication code Echo Tango 97 Delta, she transmitted urgently. I am reporting an imminent attack on Edwards Air Force Base by hostile foreign assets. Electromagnetic pulse weapon preparing for discharge from coordinates 34.876 north, 117.329 west. Request immediate intervention and security response. The seconds of silence that followed seemed eternal. Then a clipped, professional voice responded, Lightning 74, this is Strategic Command. Authentication confirmed. Stand by for instructions. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. Her cockpit warning systems suddenly blared to life. She was being targeted by ground-based electronic warfare systems, sophisticated jammers designed to disrupt her aircraft's systems. Strategic Command, I am under electronic attack, she reported, her hands flying across the controls as she implemented countermeasures. Hostile forces are attempting to disable my aircraft. The EMP weapon is powering up for discharge. Estimated time to activation less than 5 minutes. Lightning 7-4, can you neutralize the threat? Came the response. Olivia's mind raced through the options. The F-35 was armed. Standard protocol for test flights required live weapons to accurately measure aircraft performance. She had 2 precision-guided small-diameter bombs and a complement of air-to-ground missiles, more than enough to disable the electronic warfare equipment below. But firing on targets within U.S. territory, even hostile ones, was unprecedented. The rules of engagement were clear. Weapons release required direct authorization from the chain of command, a chain that, in her case, began with Colonel Barrett, who was apparently complicit in the very attack she was trying to prevent. Strategic Command, requesting weapons release authorization for immediate strike on hostile electronic warfare assets within U.S. territory, she transmitted, knowing the enormity of what she was asking. The pause that followed was longer this time. She could almost feel the frantic consultations happening on the other end of the secure link, the hurried calls to generals and possibly even civilian leadership. Meanwhile, the electronic attacks on her aircraft were intensifying. Her navigation system flickered, and error messages flashed across her displays as the enemy systems below attempted to penetrate her aircraft's electronic defenses. Lightning 7-4, this is General Howard Matheson, NORAD Commander, came a new voice, gruff and authoritative. I'm authorizing defensive action under Emergency Protocol 7. You are cleared to neutralize the immediate threat using minimum force necessary. Repeat, you are weapons free. Stop that EMP from activating. The authorization sent a surge of adrenaline through her system. Roger that, General. Engaging now. Olivia banked the F-35 into an attack profile, her training taking over as she configured her weapons systems. The Lightning II's advanced targeting capabilities quickly locked onto the 3 vehicles, identifying the central one as the primary threat, the source of the building electromagnetic energy. Weapon armed, target locked, she reported calmly, despite the storm of emotions and consequences swirling through her mind. With a final breath, she pressed the weapon release button. Weapon away. The small-diameter bomb separated cleanly from the aircraft, its guidance systems directing it unerringly toward the central vehicle. Olivia banked away sharply, executing evasive maneuvers to protect herself from any counterattack. The explosion below was precisely controlled, a testament to the weapon's advanced design. It neutralized the EMP generator with surgical precision, while minimizing collateral damage to the surrounding area. Target neutralized, she reported, circling back to assess the impact. EMP signature is dissipating. No indication of secondary threats. Well done, Lightning 7-4, came General Matheson's voice. Security forces are en route to your location. Maintain surveillance until they arrive, then return to base for immediate debrief. Sir, Olivia hesitated. Be advised that Base Commander Colonel William Barrett appears to be complicit in this operation. Recommend extreme caution in communications with Edwards' command structure. Understood, Captain. We're implementing security protocols. Barrett is being contained as we speak. You'll be met by Air Force Office of Special Investigations personnel upon landing. For the next 20 minutes, Olivia circled above the site, watching as the 2 remaining vehicles attempted to flee but were quickly intercepted by helicopter-deployed Special Forces teams that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The precision and speed of the response suggested that her warning had triggered contingency plans that were already in place. Someone, somewhere had suspected something was wrong at Edwards. As she finally turned back toward the base, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. The symbolism wasn't lost on her, darkness giving way to light, secrets exposed by the new day. The Edwards runway was a very different scene from her covert takeoff less than an hour earlier. Security forces vehicles lined the tarmac, and she could see a cordon of armed personnel surrounding the control tower. As she touched down and taxied to a stop, a group of stern-faced men and women in plain clothes approached her aircraft. "Captain Reeves," said a silver-haired woman who showed her OSI credentials. "I'm Special Agent Diana Keller. We need to debrief you immediately." "What about Major Wheeler and Senior Airman Santos?" Olivia asked as she climbed down from the cockpit. "They helped me get airborne. They shouldn't face consequences for doing the right thing." "They're being debriefed separately," Agent Keller assured her. "Their actions will be evaluated in context. For now, we need your complete account of everything that's happened in the last 24 hours." The debriefing lasted for nearly 6 hours, with Olivia recounting every detail of her flight, her observations, Barrett's strange behavior, and the events leading up to her unauthorized takeoff. Multiple intelligence officers and military legal personnel cycled through, each asking their own sets of questions, recording her responses with meticulous care. Finally, as afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the secure conference room, the door opened to admit a tall man in the uniform of a 4-star general, the Air Combat Command commander himself. "Captain Reeves," he said, extending his hand. "I'm General Richardson. I think we've kept you long enough. You must be exhausted." "I'm fine, sir," Olivia replied automatically, though the fatigue of the ordeal was beginning to settle into her bones. Richardson gestured for the other personnel to leave the room, waiting until the door closed behind them before speaking again. "What you did last night was either an act of extraordinary courage or extraordinary recklessness," he said, his expression unreadable. "Possibly both." Olivia remained silent, knowing there was nothing she could add to the extensive debriefing she'd already provided. "Colonel Barrett and 3 other officers have been taken into custody," Richardson continued. "The preliminary investigation suggests they were compromised by Chinese intelligence over a year ago. The operation you disrupted would have given them access to some of our most sensitive military technology, including complete F-35 operational data." "And the EMP device?" Olivia asked. "A prototype. Designed to temporarily disable our electronic systems while they extracted the data. The damage would have been catastrophic, not just to the physical infrastructure, but to our national security as a whole." Richardson studied her face for a long moment. "You violated direct orders, Captain. You took an aircraft without authorization. You fired weapons on U.S. soil without going through proper channels. By any standard interpretation of military law, those actions constitute serious offenses." Olivia straightened her shoulders, ready to accept whatever consequences came. "Yes, sir. However," Richardson continued, "you also demonstrated exceptional judgment in an extraordinary circumstance. You recognized a threat that others either missed or deliberately ignored. You found a way to alert proper authorities when conventional channels were compromised. And your actions directly prevented what could have been one of the most significant intelligence breaches in recent history." He placed a folder on the table between them. "This contains new orders. You're being reassigned, effective immediately." Olivia's heart sank. Despite everything, some part of her had hoped to remain at Edwards, to continue her work with the F-35 program. "May I ask where, sir?" "The Pentagon," Richardson replied. "Special Projects Division. Your experience with this incident, combined with your technical expertise and proven ability to think outside conventional parameters, makes you uniquely qualified for a task force we're assembling. The Barrett situation has exposed vulnerabilities in our command structure that need to be addressed." He slid the folder toward her. "This also includes a promotion to major, pending final approval. The investigation into last night's events will continue, but I wanted you to know that your actions have the full support of Air Force leadership." Olivia was momentarily speechless. Not only was she avoiding court-martial, but she was being promoted and assigned to a high-profile position, the exact opposite of what she had expected. "Thank you, sir," she finally managed. "What about Major Wheeler and Airman Santos?" Richardson's expression softened slightly. "They'll be recognized appropriately for their roles. Wheeler is being considered for the deputy director position in the new task force, and Santos is being fast-tracked for officer candidate school, if he's interested. As Olivia left the conference room, the events of the past 24 hours seemed almost dreamlike in their intensity and consequence. She had gone from being grounded and facing the end of her career to becoming a key figure in what would likely be a significant restructuring of Air Force security protocols. Outside the building, she found Miguel Santos waiting, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Captain, Major," he said, having apparently already heard about her promotion. "I'm glad you're okay." "Thanks to you," she replied sincerely. "If you hadn't backed up those diagnostic logs, if you hadn't been willing to help us last night." He shrugged, embarrassed by her gratitude. "You would have found another way. That's what makes you different, you don't give up, even when everyone tells you to stand down." As they walked toward the residential area of the base, the setting sun cast long shadows across the runways where the sleek shapes of F-35s waited for tomorrow's missions. For Olivia, they represented not just the culmination of aerospace engineering, but a reminder that sometimes, the most important systems are the human ones, the courage to question, the determination to act, and the willingness to risk everything for what's right. The Pentagon's Special Projects Division occupied a nondescript wing of the massive military headquarters, its entrance marked only by a simple placard and a biometric security system that put most bank vaults to shame. 3 months after the incident at Edwards Air Force Base, Major Olivia Reeves strode down its hallways with the confident bearing of someone who'd earned her place the hard way. The division she now helped lead had been tasked with an unprecedented mission, identifying and eliminating vulnerabilities in the command structure of America's most sensitive military installations. The Barrett incident, as it had come to be known in classified circles, had exposed frightening weaknesses in how authority was delegated and monitored, particularly at facilities housing next-generation weapons systems. "Major," called a voice from behind her. Olivia turned to see James Wheeler, now Lieutenant Colonel Wheeler, hurrying to catch up. His promotion had come through even faster than hers, his role in preventing the Chinese intelligence operation recognized at the highest levels. "Morning, James," she said with a smile. In the months they'd worked together at the Pentagon, their professional relationship had evolved into a friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "Ready for the briefing?" "As ready as anyone can be to tell a room full of generals that their security systems have holes you could drive a tank through," Wheeler replied dryly. Olivia chuckled. "That's why we brought videos this time. Nothing convinces brass like seeing their own security breached in high definition." They entered the secure briefing room to find it already filled with senior officers from every branch of the military, 4-star generals, admirals, and even the chairman of the Joint Chiefs himself. The gravity of their findings had warranted the highest possible audience. Major Reeves, Colonel Wheeler, acknowledged General Richardson, who had become their most staunch advocate in the upper echelons of military leadership. "I believe everyone's been cleared for the full presentation?" "Yes, sir," Olivia confirmed, connecting her secure tablet to the room's presentation system. "What we're about to share is classified TS/SCI with special access restrictions. It represents the culmination of 3 months of vulnerability testing across 17 critical military installations." As the lights dimmed, Olivia took a deep breath. This presentation would either cement her reputation as a visionary security expert or brand her as an alarmist overreacting to a single compromised officer. But the evidence they'd gathered was irrefutable. Operation Blind Spot began with a simple question, she started, her voice steady and authoritative. If one base commander could be compromised, allowing foreign assets access to classified technology, how many other vulnerabilities exist in our command structure? The screen behind her displayed a map of the United States, with key military installations highlighted. To answer this, we assembled a team of security experts, intelligence analysts, and technical specialists. Instead of testing physical security measures, which are generally robust, we focused on the human element, the chain of command, decision-making protocols, and oversight mechanisms. For the next hour, Olivia and Wheeler took turns presenting their findings. They'd discovered alarming patterns, critical decisions left to single individuals without proper verification, security protocols that could be overridden with minimal documentation, and most concerning, a culture that discouraged questioning authority even when red flags were evident. At Naval Base Kitsap, which houses Ohio-class nuclear submarines, we were able to implement a fictitious maintenance protocol that would have given us access to secure areas simply by having the approval of the base commander, Wheeler explained, showing video of their team moving freely through supposedly restricted zones. No secondary verification was required or requested. The faces of the assembled leadership grew increasingly grave as the presentation continued. What Olivia and Wheeler were demonstrating wasn't just a collection of isolated incidents, it was a systemic vulnerability that ran through the entire military command structure. Now for the most critical finding, Olivia said, switching to a new slide. In 76% of our test scenarios, when junior officers or enlisted personnel noted potential security violations, they were discouraged from reporting up the chain of command or outside normal channels. The phrase we heard repeatedly was, "That's not your concern." She paused, allowing the significance to sink in. The same phrase Colonel Barrett used when I reported unauthorized vehicles at Edwards. Our culture of strict adherence to the chain of command, while essential for battlefield operations, has created blind spots in our security framework that adversaries can and will exploit. The room was silent as Olivia advanced to their final slide, a comprehensive proposal for restructuring security protocols across all military installations. We're recommending 3 core changes, she explained. First, implementation of a 2-key system for all critical security decisions, requiring independent verification from separate command authorities. Second, establishment of secure reporting channels that allow personnel to flag potential security violations without fear of reprisal. And third, a fundamental shift in training to emphasize that security is everyone's responsibility, regardless of rank or role. General Richardson leaned forward. That's a massive overhaul, Major. You're essentially proposing we rethink decades of established command structure. Yes, sir, Olivia acknowledged without hesitation. Because our adversaries already have. The Barrett incident wasn't an anomaly, it was a preview of the new battlefield. One where the most dangerous attacks don't come from missiles or aircraft, but from manipulating our own command systems against us. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a decorated combat veteran with 4 decades of service, had remained silent throughout the presentation. Now he fixed Olivia with an evaluating stare. You're asking us to fundamentally change how we operate, Major Reeves. That kind of institutional change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without resistance. With respect, sir, Olivia replied, meeting his gaze steadily, we don't have the luxury of gradual adjustment. Every day we maintain vulnerable systems is another day adversaries can exploit them. Colonel Barrett wasn't acting alone. He was the visible part of a coordinated intelligence operation that likely has other assets in place. The chairman nodded slowly. I understand the urgency. What I'm asking is whether you're prepared for what implementing these changes will entail. You'll be challenging deeply ingrained cultural norms, questioning the authority of commanding officers, and essentially telling people who've spent their careers mastering the current system that they need to learn a new one. Olivia felt the weight of the question. He wasn't just asking about the technical feasibility of their recommendations, he was asking if she was ready to become the face of a controversial transformation that would inevitably generate powerful opposition. Sir, 3 months ago I was grounded in facing the end of my career because I questioned authority when I saw something wrong, she said, her voice quiet but firm. If implementing these changes means facing resistance, even hostility, that's a price I'm willing to pay. Because the alternative is waiting until the next Colonel Barrett succeeds where he failed. The chairman held her gaze for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his weathered face. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for, Major. Because resistance is exactly what you're going to get, and we need someone with the courage to push through it. He turned to address the room at large. I'm approving the implementation of Operation Blind Spot's recommendations, effective immediately. General Richardson, I want you to establish a dedicated task force under Major Reeves's direction to oversee the transition. Full authority, full resources, direct reporting to this office. As the meeting adjourned and the senior officers filed out, many stopping to congratulate Olivia on her presentation, she felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in their work being recognized, determination to implement the necessary changes, and a sobering awareness of the challenges ahead. Wheeler approached, a bemused expression on his face. "Congratulations on your new task force. Just one question: did you actually want to be in charge of rewiring the entire military's security culture, or did you just get voluntold into the most politically radioactive assignment in the Pentagon?" Olivia laughed, the tension of the presentation finally breaking. "Probably both. But someone has to do it, and at least we know what we're fighting for." "Well," Wheeler said with a grin, "at least you won't be bored. And speaking of not being bored, there's something else you should know. The chairman signed off on your flight status reinstatement this morning. You're back on the active pilot roster." The news hit Olivia with unexpected force. She'd been so focused on the security work that she'd almost forgotten her original passion: flying the world's most advanced aircraft, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the sky. "Really?" Even with all this, she gestured to the briefing materials. "Especially with all this," Wheeler replied. His exact words were, "I want her to remember what she's protecting." Besides, the F-35 program still needs test pilots who understand its capabilities in relation to emerging threats. Your experience at Edwards makes you uniquely qualified. Later that day, Olivia found herself in another part of the Pentagon, a secure room where the Air Force maintained simulation systems for its most advanced aircraft. She'd been granted an hour of simulator time to refamiliarize herself with the F-35's controls after 3 months behind a desk. As she settled into the simulator's replica cockpit, the familiar displays coming to life around her, she felt a sense of homecoming that surprised her with its intensity. For all the important work she'd been doing in the Special Projects Division, this was where her journey had started, in the pilot's seat, hands on the controls, ready to push boundaries and defy expectations. The simulator mission was a complex one, designed to test her handling of the aircraft in contested airspace while managing multiple threat scenarios. As she worked through the challenges, her muscle memory returned instantly, her situational awareness and decision-making as sharp as ever. "Impressive performance, Major," said a voice as she completed the final objective. She turned to see a woman in Air Force dress blues standing at the door of the simulator room, Brigadier General Elaine Winters, the newly appointed head of the Air Force's Advanced Combat Aircraft Division. "General Winters," Olivia acknowledged with surprise, quickly moving to stand at attention. "I wasn't expecting an audience." "At ease, Major," Winters said with a smile. "I wanted to see for myself if the pilot who prevented an intelligence catastrophe was as good in the cockpit as her record suggests." "Appears the answer is yes." Olivia relaxed slightly. "Thank you, ma'am. Though I have to say, pushing a simulator to its limits isn't quite the same as the real thing." "Precisely why I'm here," Winters replied, handing her a folder with classified markings. "Your task force work is critical, but the chairman and I agree you need to maintain your flight proficiency with actual stick time. Inside you'll find orders for a special assignment, 2 weeks at Nellis Air Force Base with the 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron." Olivia opened the folder, scanning the contents with growing excitement. The 422nd was the Air Force's premier fighter testing unit, responsible for developing and validating combat tactics for the most advanced aircraft in the inventory. "This is temporary duty alongside your primary assignment," Winters continued. 1 week each month, you'll work with the 422nd on integrating your security findings into operational testing. The rest of the time, you'll continue leading the task force here. It's an unusual arrangement, but these are unusual times. 2 days later, Olivia found herself back in a real F-35 cockpit, the Nevada desert stretching below her as she joined a formation of 4 other Lightning IIs for a complex combat scenario. The squadron commander had welcomed her with professional courtesy, though she'd detected undercurrents of skepticism from some of the other pilots, the inevitable response to an outsider joining their elite unit, especially one whose reputation preceded her. "All right, Lightning Flight," came the squadron commander's voice over the radio. Today's scenario simulates penetrating integrated air defenses to strike high-value targets. Major Reeves, since you've had some, recent experience with electronic warfare threats, you'll lead the second element. The subtle reference to the Edwards incident wasn't lost on Olivia or the other pilots. She acknowledged the assignment professionally, ignoring the implied challenge in his tone. The exercise began with the formation splitting into two elements, each taking different approach vectors toward the simulated enemy defenses. Almost immediately, Olivia's threat warning systems lit up with electronic signatures, advanced surface-to-air missile systems and enemy fighters converging on their position. Lightning 3, break right, Sam, launch at your 6, she called, having spotted the threat indicator before the other pilot had reacted. Her warning came just in time, allowing the third aircraft to deploy countermeasures and evade the simulated missile. Good catch, 4, acknowledged Lightning 3, Captain Jason Reed, one of the squadron's more experienced pilots. I didn't see that one. For the next 45 minutes, the scenario grew increasingly complex, with multiple threat layers requiring precise coordination and split-second decisions. Olivia found herself automatically applying the insights from her security work, identifying patterns in the electronic defenses, anticipating vulnerabilities, and coordinating responses that maximized their effectiveness while minimizing exposure. When one of the other aircraft in her element reported system malfunctions that would have forced most pilots to abort, she quickly devised an alternative approach that allowed them to complete the mission while providing protective coverage for the compromised aircraft. By the time they returned to base, the initial skepticism had given way to a different kind of evaluation, the wary respect fighter pilots accord to someone who's proven themselves in the air. Interesting tactics out there, Major, the squadron commander commented during the debriefing. Not standard doctrine, but effective. Where'd you pick that up? A combination of places, sir, Olivia replied. Part Edwards test protocols, part what we've learned studying how adversaries target our command and control systems. Well, it worked, he acknowledged. Especially that modified screening formation you used when Jensen's systems were degraded. I'd like to see more of that kind of adaptive thinking. Over the following days, Olivia integrated more fully into the squadron's operations, bringing her unique perspective on security vulnerabilities to their tactical development process. Her dual role, fighter pilot and security expert, allowed her to bridge worlds that rarely communicated effectively, translating technical vulnerabilities into practical combat considerations. By the end of her first week at Nellis, she'd earned something more valuable than formal acceptance, the professional respect of pilots who judged others solely on their abilities in the air and their contributions to the mission. You know what I don't get, said Captain Reed as they reviewed footage from the day's exercises in the squadron ready room. How someone with your skills almost got sidelined because you spotted a security threat. Isn't that literally what we're trained to do, identify and respond to threats? It's complicated, Olivia replied, choosing her words carefully. The military needs structure and clear chains of command to function effectively. But that same structure can create blind spots if we don't build in safeguards and alternative reporting channels. Like what happened with Barrett, Reed observed. Guy was a decorated officer with an impeccable record. Nobody thought to question his orders because, well, who questions a base commander? Exactly, Olivia said. And that's what we're trying to fix with the task force. Not undermining command authority, but creating systems where legitimate security concerns can be validated without being dismissed as insubordination. Reed considered this. Makes sense in theory, but I can see why some of the old guard might resist. Change is the dynamic they're used to. Change is always hard, Olivia agreed. But not changing when threats evolve is worse. As her 2 weeks at Nellis drew to a close, Olivia found herself in a final briefing with the squadron commander and General Winters, who had flown in specifically to evaluate the integration experiment. Your assessment, Colonel? Winters asked the squadron commander. Highly successful, ma'am, he replied without hesitation. Major Reeves has brought valuable insights to our tactical development process, and her piloting skills are exceptional. The dual-role arrangement has proven more effective than I anticipated. Winters nodded, pleased. And your thoughts, Major? Is this arrangement serving both missions effectively? Olivia considered the question carefully. Yes, ma'am. Being actively engaged in operational flying keeps me grounded in the realities of what we're trying to protect. And bringing security perspectives directly into tactical development means we're building more resilient combat capabilities from the start, rather than trying to patch vulnerabilities later. Then we'll continue the arrangement, Winters decided. 1 week monthly at Nellis, 3 weeks with your task force at the Pentagon. We'll review again in 6 months, but based on initial results, I expect this to become a model for other critical integration positions. As Olivia prepared to board the transport back to Washington, she found herself approached by Captain Reed and several other pilots from the squadron. "We've been talking," Reed said, gesturing to the group, "about what you're trying to do with the security reforms. It's important work, and we want to help." Olivia looked at them with surprise. "I appreciate that, but how exactly?" "We're the ones who'll be implementing these new protocols in the field," Reed explained. "Instead of just imposing them from the Pentagon, why not let us help develop them? We can be your test bed, try out different approaches, give you real feedback on what works and what doesn't." The offer stunned her, not just the practical assistance it represented, but what it symbolized. These pilots, members of one of the most elite and tradition-bound communities in the military, were volunteering to be at the forefront of a cultural change that many of their peers would resist. "That would be invaluable," she said sincerely. "The biggest challenge isn't designing the protocols, it's creating systems that people will actually use in real-world conditions." "Then it's settled," Reed said with a grin. "The 422nd is officially volunteering as your guinea pigs. Just promise when the inevitable resistance comes, you'll remember there are people out here who believe in what you're doing." As the transport lifted off from Nellis, carrying her back to the bureaucratic battlegrounds of the Pentagon, Olivia reflected on how far she'd come from that fateful flight 3 months ago. She'd gone from being grounded and facing the end of her career to leading a transformation in how the military approached security, all because she'd trusted her instincts and refused to ignore a threat, even when ordered to stand down. The path ahead would be challenging. Institutional change never came easily, especially in organizations as steeped in tradition and hierarchy as the military. There would be resistance, bureaucratic obstacles, and moments when success seemed impossible. But looking out the window at the fighter jets taking off below, the aircraft she would return to fly again next month, Olivia felt a profound certainty that the mission she'd undertaken was worth every challenge it would bring. Because beyond the policies and protocols, beyond the technical specifications and security systems, what they were really building was a culture where doing the right thing wasn't punished, it was expected and supported, regardless of rank or position. And that, perhaps more than any weapon system or tactical advantage, would be America's true strength in the complex security landscape of the future. The chilly November rain fell steadily over Arlington National Cemetery, dark clouds hanging low above the pristine rows of white headstones. 1 year had passed since the incident at Edwards Air Force Base, and Major Olivia Reeves stood motionless beside a fresh grave, not of a fallen comrade, but of Colonel William Barrett, who had died in federal custody 3 days earlier. The official cause was listed as heart failure, though rumors of suicide circulated among those familiar with his case. Olivia wasn't entirely sure why she'd come. Barrett had betrayed his country, endangered countless lives, and nearly destroyed her career. Yet something had drawn her to this sparse military funeral, attended only by Barrett's elderly sister and a chaplain who spoke generic words over the coffin of a man whose true story would remain classified for decades. "Closure?" asked a familiar voice. She turned to find Lieutenant General Richardson, recently promoted, standing behind her under a large black umbrella. "I'm not sure," Olivia admitted. "Maybe understanding." He had an exemplary record before he was turned. 30 years of dedicated service. "I keep wondering what made him vulnerable, what pushed him to betray everything he'd sworn to protect." Richardson nodded solemnly. "The full counterintelligence assessment came in yesterday. Classified, of course, but I can tell you the broad strokes. It wasn't ideology or money that turned him, it was pride and resentment. He'd been passed over for promotion twice, felt the military had failed to recognize his contributions. When Chinese intelligence approached him, they didn't lead with bribes, they led with recognition, with validation. They told him what he desperately wanted to hear, Olivia murmured. That he deserved more than he'd received. Exactly. The most dangerous vulnerability isn't greed or ideology, it's feeling unvalued, feeling that the system you've dedicated your life to doesn't appreciate your worth. Richardson gestured toward his waiting car. Walk with me. There are developments you should know about. As they moved through the rain-soaked cemetery, Richardson explained that the Chinese intelligence operation had been more extensive than initially suspected. Barrett wasn't an isolated case, he was part of a coordinated effort targeting mid-level and senior officers who showed signs of career frustration or personal vulnerability. Your security reforms are being implemented faster than planned, Richardson said as they reached his vehicle. The Joint Chiefs are convinced of the urgency. But there's a new wrinkle. We've identified similar vulnerability patterns at NATO installations in Europe. Intelligence suggests coordinated efforts by multiple hostile actors. You want to expand the scope of our task force, Olivia guessed, already mentally cataloging the resources they'd need for an international operation. More than that, Richardson replied, handing her a sealed envelope bearing NATO security markings. You've been requested specifically to head a multinational working group on command structure vulnerabilities. 6 months in Brussels, starting next week. Olivia opened the envelope, scanning the official orders with a mixture of surprise and professional satisfaction. In just 1 year, she'd gone from being grounded by a compromised officer to leading an international effort to prevent similar breaches across the entire alliance. What about my flight status? The arrangement with the 422nd, she asked, thinking of the valuable work they'd accomplished testing new security protocols in operational settings. That's actually the other reason I wanted to talk to you, Richardson said, a hint of pride creeping into his normally stoic expression. Your dual-role model has proven so effective that we're implementing it as standard procedure for senior security positions. Officers maintaining operational proficiency while developing security protocols, it bridges the gap between theory and practice in ways we hadn't anticipated. 3 days later, Olivia found herself back at Nellis for one final flight before departing for Brussels. As she walked across the tarmac toward her assigned F-35, she spotted a familiar figure waiting beside the aircraft, Captain Jason Reed, now Major Reed, who had become one of her strongest allies in implementing the security reforms. Thought I'd see you off properly, Reed said with a grin. Rumor has it you're taking your show on the road to Europe. News travels fast, Olivia replied, returning his smile. I would have thought operational security would keep that quiet for at least another day. Reed shrugged. The squadron's been briefed since we'll be part of the coordinated testing with NATO partners. Several of us will be rotating through European deployments to maintain continuity in the testing protocols. As they completed the pre-flight checks together, Olivia reflected on how far they'd come in just 12 months. The initial resistance to her security reforms had given way to broad acceptance as early implementation showed promising results. More importantly, the cultural shift she'd championed, where questioning authority in the name of security was valued rather than punished, was beginning to take root. You know what I realized recently? Reed said as they finished the inspection. Before your reforms, I'd have hesitated to report something that seemed off if it meant questioning a superior officer. Now, I'd make that call without a second thought, and I know I'd be backed up by the system. That's the whole point, Olivia replied. Not undermining authority, but creating resilience against single points of failure. Her final flight that day wasn't a complex combat simulation or a technical evaluation, it was a simple high-altitude training mission, designed to push the F-35 to its performance limits while giving her a chance to experience the pure joy of flight that had drawn her to aviation in the first place. As she climbed through 40,000 feet, the storm clouds that had blanketed the East Coast during Barrett's funeral were nowhere to be seen. The Nevada sky stretched endlessly blue above her, the horizon curving visibly at the edges of her vision as the F-35 approached its ceiling. Lightning 7-4, this is control. You're cleared for the performance demonstration. Range is clear, airspace is secure. Roger that, Control, Olivia acknowledged, then put the Lightning II through a series of maneuvers that demonstrated its remarkable capabilities, tight turns that would have rendered a human pilot unconscious in older aircraft, climbs that seemed to defy physics, and precision handling that made the 25-ton fighter respond like an extension of her own body. For these precious minutes, the weight of her responsibilities, the NATO assignment, the continuing security reforms, the constant vigilance against threats both external and internal, lifted from her shoulders. Here, in the cockpit of the world's most advanced fighter jet, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, she was simply a pilot pursuing excellence. As she finally brought the aircraft back to a standard cruise profile and began her return to base, Olivia found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. If Barrett hadn't grounded her, if she hadn't spotted those vehicles, if she hadn't chosen to defy orders and take off that night, none of the security reforms would have happened. Sometimes the greatest opportunities emerged from what initially seemed like career-ending crises. 3 days later, Olivia arrived at NATO headquarters in Brussels, the massive glass and steel structure housing the Alliance's central command. She'd expected the usual bureaucratic reception, paperwork, credentials, perhaps a perfunctory welcome from a mid-level administrator. Instead, she found herself greeted by Air Marshal Jonathan Blackwood, Deputy Supreme Allied Commander for Europe. "Major Reeves," he said, extending his hand. "Your reputation precedes you. I've read your security protocols with great interest, particularly the mechanisms for validating concerns raised outside normal command channels." As he led her through the security checkpoints toward the classified briefing areas, Blackwood explained that NATO had experienced several troubling incidents in recent months, nothing as dramatic as the Edwards affair, but enough pattern similarities to raise serious concerns about coordinated infiltration attempts. "The challenge we face," he continued as they entered a secure conference room, "is balancing operational security with the Alliance's political realities. 28 member nations, each with their own military traditions, security protocols, and frankly, vulnerabilities." Inside the conference room, Olivia found representatives from a dozen NATO nations, senior officers from Britain, France, Germany, Poland, and others, all waiting to hear how her security reforms might be adapted to the multinational command structure of the Alliance. "Major Reeves," Blackwood said formally, "I believe you know why we've brought you here. Your insights at Edwards potentially saved more than just American military secrets, they exposed a vulnerability that exists throughout NATO's command structure. We need to address it before our adversaries can exploit it on a larger scale." For the next 6 hours, Olivia led a detailed discussion of the security protocols she developed, adapting them to the unique challenges of NATO's multinational environment. The European officers were initially reserved, some clearly skeptical that an American major, a female fighter pilot, no less, had insights valuable enough to merit changing decades of established procedures. But as the discussion progressed, their professional respect became evident. Olivia didn't present herself as having all the answers. Instead, she framed the conversation around shared challenges and collaborative solutions, drawing on the expertise of everyone present to adapt her core principles to NATO's complex realities. "The fundamental question," she explained, "isn't whether we need chains of command, we absolutely do. It's how we create systems where legitimate security concerns can be validated without being dismissed simply because they come from lower-ranking personnel or question the judgment of senior officers." A French colonel who had been particularly skeptical leaned forward. "And how do we distinguish between legitimate concerns and insubordination disguised as security alerts? In my experience, the line is not always clear." It was a fair question, and one that Olivia had wrestled with throughout the implementation of her reforms in the U.S. "The key is creating verification protocols that don't depend on the chain of command itself," she replied. "In our system, security alerts follow 2 simultaneous paths, one through standard channels, and another through an independent validation team that has authority to investigate without prior command approval." She displayed a diagram showing how the system worked in practice. The validation team doesn't make operational decisions, that remains with commanders. But they can authenticate concerns that might otherwise be dismissed due to organizational politics or human error. As the briefing concluded and the officers filed out, Air Marshal Blackwood remained behind, studying Olivia with thoughtful consideration. "You know," he said conversationally, "when I first heard about an American major who'd defied direct orders and taken an F-35 without authorization, I had certain expectations. Most officers who break the rules so dramatically tend to be, shall we say, difficult personalities, brave, perhaps, but not necessarily the sort you'd want redesigning command structures." Olivia smiled slightly. "And what did you find instead?" "Someone who understands that courage sometimes means challenging authority, but who also respects the necessary hierarchies that make military operations possible," Blackwood replied. "It's a rare balance, especially in aviators, who tend toward the independent end of the spectrum." Over the following months, Olivia's work with NATO expanded beyond the initial security reforms to encompass a complete reevaluation of how the alliance handled sensitive information and command decisions. Her technical expertise with advanced aircraft systems proved unexpectedly valuable as NATO integrated new generations of stealth and electronic warfare capabilities across member nations. True to Richardson's promise, she maintained her flight status, participating in multinational exercises that tested not just aircraft capabilities but the new security protocols and operational settings. Flying alongside British Typhoons, French Rafales, and German Eurofighters, she helped forge connections between technical capabilities and security requirements that strengthened the entire alliance. By the time her 6-month assignment approached its conclusion, the NATO Security Enhancement Program, nicknamed Reeves Protocols by those implementing them, had been adopted by 23 member nations. More importantly, the cultural shift she'd championed was taking root in the alliance's multinational command structure. On her final day in Brussels, Olivia found herself in Air Marshal Blackwood's office for a concluding assessment. The walls were adorned with memorabilia from his long career, photographs with world leaders, model aircraft from the various squadrons he'd commanded, and a framed piece of the Berlin Wall symbolizing NATO's central role in maintaining European security. "The Secretary-General has reviewed the final implementation report," Blackwood said, gesturing to a thick document on his desk. "He's impressed, not just with the technical aspects, but with how you've managed to create buy-in across such diverse military cultures." "It helped that we had real threats to focus on," Olivia replied. "Nothing unites military professionals like a common adversary." Blackwood nodded. "Indeed. Which brings me to your next assignment. I've been in discussions with General Richardson and the Supreme Allied Commander about establishing a permanent Joint Security Integration Office, a team dedicated to ensuring our technical capabilities, operational procedures, and security protocols evolve together rather than in separate silos." He slid a folder across the desk. "We'd like you to head it, with promotion to Lieutenant Colonel. Half your time would be operational flying with multinational squadrons, half dedicated to security integration across the alliance. Based here in Brussels, with regular rotations to operational bases throughout Europe and North America." Olivia opened the folder, scanning the details of the proposed position. It represented an extraordinary opportunity, a chance to institutionalize the reforms she'd championed, ensuring they became permanent features of the alliance rather than temporary measures that might be abandoned when attention shifted elsewhere. This would be career-defining work, she acknowledged. "But why me? There are more senior officers with deeper experience in multinational operations." Blackwood smiled. "Because you understand something most career officers never fully grasp, that true security doesn't come from rigid adherence to protocols or unquestioning obedience. It comes from creating systems resilient enough to withstand both external attacks and internal failures." He gestured toward the window, where the flags of NATO member nations fluttered in the Belgian breeze. "And because your story has become something of a legend throughout the alliance, the pilot who was grounded for seeing a threat others missed, who risked everything to do what was right, and who then helped build systems where such risks wouldn't be necessary in the future." 6 weeks later, Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Reeves stood on the flight line at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, preparing to lead a multinational formation of NATO aircraft in an exercise designed to test both their combat capabilities and the new security protocols. Beside her F-35 stood pilots from 6 different nations, their diverse aircraft representing the Alliance's combined strength. "Interesting formation you've designed for today's exercise," observed a British wing commander, studying the tactical plan she'd distributed earlier. "Rather unconventional approach to the integrated defense penetration." "Conventional approaches are what adversaries expect and prepare for," Olivia replied. "Our greatest advantage comes from thinking differently while maintaining coordinated action." As they dispersed to their aircraft, Olivia took a moment to appreciate the journey that had brought her here. From being grounded and facing the end of her career to leading multinational combat formations and reshaping security protocols across the world's most powerful military alliance, all because she trusted her instincts and found the courage to act when others told her to stand down. The weather was perfect for flying, with clear skies and unlimited visibility across the European countryside. As she completed her pre-flight checks, Olivia couldn't help but reflect on how different this moment was from that tense night at Edwards, when she'd taken off without authorization, uncertain if she was saving her base or destroying her career. "Lightning lead, this is control," came the voice of the exercise coordinator. "All aircraft report ready for mission commencement. You are cleared for takeoff sequence." "Roger that, control," Olivia replied, feeling the familiar surge of anticipation that came before every flight. "Lightning lead is ready. Beginning multinational exercise Unified Defender." The F-35's powerful engine roared to life as she advanced the throttle, the acceleration pressing her back into her seat as the aircraft raced down the runway. Within moments, she was airborne, banking into a gentle climbing turn as the other aircraft in the formation took off in precisely timed intervals. As the multinational formation assembled at 20,000 feet, Olivia looked around at the aircraft flying in perfect coordination, different designs from different nations, yet moving together as a unified force. It was a powerful metaphor for what she'd helped create, diverse systems working in harmony, stronger together than any could be alone. "All aircraft, this is Lightning lead," she transmitted to the formation. "Mission parameters are uploaded to your systems. Remember, today we're not just testing our combat capabilities, we're validating our ability to identify and respond to security anomalies within the command structure. Stay alert for embedded challenge scenarios." What followed was the most complex multinational exercise NATO had conducted in years, a sophisticated simulation that integrated conventional air combat with electronic warfare and security breach scenarios. Throughout the mission, Olivia led the formation through a series of challenges designed to test not just their flying skills, but their ability to identify and respond to potential security threats within their own command structure. When the exercise controller issued an order that contradicted established security protocols, 3 different pilots from 3 different nations identified the anomaly simultaneously, exactly as the new system was designed to work. When electronic warfare attacks attempted to insert false communications into their secure networks, the validation procedures Olivia had implemented allowed the formation to maintain operational integrity despite the electronic disruption. By the time they returned to Ramstein 3 hours later, the exercise had validated not just the technical aspects of the security reforms, but their practical implementation in complex multinational operations. The NATO observers were unanimously positive in their assessment. The Reeves protocols had transformed potential vulnerabilities into new sources of resilience. As Olivia climbed down from her aircraft, she was met by a group of young pilots from various NATO nations who had observed the exercise, the next generation of aviators who would operate in the security environment she had helped create. "Colonel Reeves," said a young Norwegian lieutenant, her expression earnest, "they've been teaching us about your experience at Edwards in our security briefings. How did you find the courage to take off that night, knowing you were violating direct orders?" Olivia considered the question carefully, aware that her answer would shape how these young officers approached similar dilemmas in their own careers. "Courage isn't about ignoring orders or rejecting authority," she replied. "It's about remembering that our ultimate responsibility is to the mission and to each other. Sometimes that means working within the system, and sometimes it means recognizing when the system itself has been compromised." She gestured toward the multinational aircraft arrayed across the flight line. "What we've built together, these new protocols, these validation systems, means that future pilots shouldn't have to make the choice I did. You'll have secure channels to raise concerns, independent validation processes to assess them, and a culture that values security awareness at every level. As the young pilots dispersed, Olivia remained on the flight line, watching the sunset paint the German sky in brilliant oranges and reds. From this vantage point, she could see aircraft from a dozen different nations, each representing thousands of hours of engineering genius, each capable of extraordinary feats of speed and maneuverability, yet each ultimately dependent on the human beings who flew them and the systems that supported them. The security protocols she had developed would never be perfect, no human system ever could be. But they had transformed a critical vulnerability into a new source of strength, not by eliminating the need for authority and command structure, but by creating resilience against the inevitable imperfections of any human organization. As darkness fell and the lights of Ramstein Air Base came on around her, Olivia felt a sense of completion that transcended professional accomplishment. She had taken a moment of personal crisis, being grounded unjustly, facing the end of her career, and transformed it into an opportunity that strengthened not just her own country's security, but that of the entire alliance. The journey wasn't over, there would always be new threats, new vulnerabilities, new challenges requiring courage and innovation to overcome. But she had helped create a world where doing the right thing, even when it meant questioning authority, wasn't career suicide but an essential part of the mission. And perhaps that was the most important lesson of all, that true security came not from rigid adherence to hierarchy, but from creating systems resilient enough to withstand both external attacks and internal failures, systems that valued integrity and moral courage as much as discipline and chain of command. As Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Reeves finally turned toward the officers' quarters, she carried with her the certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same determination and clarity of purpose that had guided her through that fateful night at Edwards. Not alone, but as part of something larger than herself, a community of professionals united by shared values and common purpose, stronger together than any could be alone. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.